here we are. Been trying to get you to do this for a while now. You feel good?
I've been really busy.
I know.
I have a really busy schedule.
I know. Well, thanks for sitting down and making time for me to do this podcast.
Anytime.
I don't know about that anytime, but I feel like it's been
You've been asking me for months, so I'm
maybe
sorry.
more than months, maybe like a year, but maybe something like that.
Well, the official request came in a couple months ago.
True.
Yeah. So, but here I am.
Yeah. So everybody in context, so this is my wife, Kelly, and she has a unique gift that I think is almost indescribable. And that's what I wanted to have her on to share because it's such a unique gift. It's often looked at as sometimes evil, and I think that's the biggest fallacy in the world of unique gifts, and they're never that way, and they're twisted in that way. So I wanted to have her on because she's I think she's incredibly special. We've been together for almost since 2006, so coming up on a little while.
Coming up on a little while.
And
Yeah.
I wanted you to be on here because Zen and call signs, part of it, of why I wanted to do this is because of you. And I want you to share your gift with the world. And this is a small way that I want to help you do that. So that being said, let's start at the beginning, young childhood. Tell me, what was your first experience with supernatural, psychic, something that you couldn't explain as a young child? What was your first experience or something that you can remember?
My first really vivid memory of a psychic experience, the word psychic is rooted in Greek, and it means a couple of things. First of all, it means the soul. So a psychic knowing is a knowing from the soul, and typically it refers to the knowing about somebody else's soul. So it's soul to soul communication. And I've also heard psychic described as an awareness of the supernatural. Anything that can't be described in the 3D, seen, felt, heard in the 3D, but can be seen, felt, heard supernaturally.
Yeah, Carl Jung has talked about that
Is psychic.
throughout his.
So just because not everybody understands the difference between psychic and mediumship, and my gift is in both psychically and mediumistically, as you know. So my earliest memory is a psychic memory, and I was sleeping. I was 6 years old, and we were living in Littleton, Colorado. I don't think you've ever driven past that house. Someday I'll have to drive you past
Littleton?
that house.
Yeah, we went there.
The Littleton house?
Yeah.
Okay. So my bedroom is in the second story, and mom and dad had tucked me in. I was sleeping. And I remember just waking up, sitting up, and I think I was fully asleep, but I may have been in that state where you're just sort of half asleep. But I remember just sitting up, and I had this kind of feeling of dread that washed over me, and I just started crying and crying. And so mom came running, and she thought, I was hurt, something was wrong. And she says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "Grandma, it's grandma." I just had this knowing that dropped in. I knew there was something wrong. I felt the feeling of dread. We've all had it. Everybody has intuition. You just have this foreboding feeling. But there was this knowing that it was connected to grandma. And my grandparents, who you've met, but are no longer here. They're now they're here. They're in spirit. They were on an Alaskan cruise. So my mom said, no, it was back in the day of landlines, right? So she said, no, I said, "Grandma, something's wrong with grandma." She said, no, she's okay. They're fine. I just talked to them today. They called. They were in port somewhere, Anchorage or somewhere. And is Anchorage on the water? Okay. For a minute, I had a little geographical blank. But they were in port, and they called mom, and everything was fine. And they were having a great time and all of that. And so she says, they're fine. We're going to pick them up in a few days in Denver. And she got me to calm down. I went back to sleep. And then we went to pick them up in Denver, and they walked off the airplane, again, back in the day when you could meet at the gate, right? And we met them at the gate, and they walked off, and my grandmother is in a cast from her hip all the way to her ankle. And my mom was able to link it back together with my grandparents to the time that I sat up crying was the time that she had fallen and shattered her entire leg, getting on or off the ship. I'm assuming it was getting on, since my mom had talked to them in port. But anyway, and so that was the earliest really poignant memory. I know that there were more. I remember have a very great long-term memory and a very bad, as you know, short-term memory. But the long-term is like ironclad. And I remember even before the age of 6, I would have been, my brother and I are 2.5 years apart, so I would have been like almost 2. And I remember knowing that there was going to be a brother for me. I just knew I was going to be a big sister, and I knew it was going to be a boy. And that was before my mom had a baby. So, so I think there were little things like that that I could probably pinpoint earlier on. But yeah, so 6 was probably the most unique
Yeah.
psychic memory I can remember.
How did you feel? So I guess from 6 years old to, let's say, high school, with kind of gaining some knowledge, you know, becoming a woman and different things like that, and then high school, going to a Christian school. How did you manage the juxtaposition of having these psychic things, whatever that you're seeing, right, undeniable to you, and then being around being Christian and growing up that way, and we both did, and the balance of that, of like what you're thinking and maybe limiting what you're saying about what you're feeling, seeing, you know, from abject reality to this and that, and balance that life, I guess, with, I mean, where did you start seeing through the veil, like, say, like questioning things, or were they answering your questions like, well, how can I see all this? I know there's a lot of questions in there, but like, you know, how did you manage your Christian faith with like all these other things that maybe were indescribable or weren't detailed or written out for you?
Yeah, I didn't really see it as managing so much. It was more of an exploration at
Yeah.
that point, as it is when you're a teenager, because everything is an exploration, everything is a navigation. And I went to a wonderful school in Madison, Texas, and Christian, obviously very strongly Christian based. And so everything that happened, I remember bringing to my Bible teacher at the time and just saying, okay, this happened, so what does this mean? And I, you know, they didn't discount it. He didn't right away throw it into a basket of it's evil. But for example, there was an experience, and I'd had experiences prior to this, but there's an experience around the age of 17. I think I was a junior in high school. And the house that we were living in at the time had a little study in the corner of the front of the house. And there were shelves on the wall. The shelves had books on them. So when we'd first moved in, I was 9 when we first moved in. So this was 17, many, many years later. We put a bunch of books on the shelves, and you know, and it was kind of supposed to look like one of those libraries that we could have put a ladder on it, but we didn't. So those books sat there for that long, for that many years. And in between the books, there was sort of a cutout for a desk and a computer. So I was sitting there writing a paper, doing some sort of homework. And I kind of heard something just in time to look up. And as I looked up, a Bible projectile fell off the shelf. Like it flew over my head, over the desk, and behind me, open. And so I jumped up and I went running. I just bolted out of the office and I went and found my mom and I said, Mom, you know, and incidentally, that same office, another 2 experiences in there, all with religious relics. So there were crosses also up on the shelf, silver crosses, you know, the kind you get in Mexico, had been there for years. And those at some point in time, separate incidences, came flying off the shelf. So the mindset is all of a sudden is, oh my God, it must be evil, right? Like it doesn't want the Bible, it doesn't want the crosses. So whatever's in there is bad. So when I went to my Bible teacher, who actually was an incredible psychic, he was I don't know what they call him, like he was good at personology. I think that's what it's called, where we would just for fun, we would bring him a picture of somebody he'd never met before, like a photo, Kodak photo. And just looking at it, he could tell us about that person. And he would point to, oh, their chin is this way or their nose is that way. And there's some truth to that, cold reading. He was so phenomenal. I mean, he would know how many brothers and sisters there was no way their nose told him that, right? Like he was psychic. So I think there was some part of me that knew like he has some gifts and they're spiritual gifts and they're okay because he's a Bible teacher at a Christian school. So let me go talk to him. And, you know, the best explanation, and bless his heart, I think he tried, but the best explanation he had is that I needed to read the Bible more words. I was like, okay, well, I mean, I took it to heart. I read the Bible more, but it didn't help with the paranormal activity. It almost felt like the closer I got to God, the more I was in the Word and reading the Bible, the more active everything was.
Right? I feel like
So
that's I would expect that though.
maybe there's some interesting other possible explanations for what was going on. There's the theory of telekinesis, that we all have magnetic fields. The Earth is a magnetic field. And if our magnetic field is pinging, that's what I call it. I don't think it's a scientific term, but it's not in balance. There's a possibility, at least, that maybe it was me. Maybe it wasn't a ghost at all. Maybe it was my energy, my spirit that was moving things off the shelf. Why they would have been religious relics, I have no idea. There are people, this is out there, probably even for you, but there are people who say that when they've had a near-death experience, or they've had what they believe to be an alien encounter of some sort, an abduction or an encounter. And I believe there's one other sort of category that falls into this, but I haven't blanking on it right now. But after a near-death experience or an ET encounter of some sort, they have a high instance of telekinesis directly afterwards. And I had kind of an interesting visitor in my room that was, to me at the time, it was very scary. Right around the same time all of this stuff was flying off the shelves. So, they say poltergeist and paranormal activity gets really active around teenage years for people. And they've described it as like raging emotions or, I don't know, hormones and puberty, that maybe that somehow draws in spirits that are more active, but perhaps, I don't know, perhaps that's part of it. Perhaps it's telekinesis.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So I've thought that you grew up with an interesting balance of nature and nurture in the sense that you had a gift and you kind of had your own things and did your own things very young, from a young age. So you like had something, but then also, since I know you pretty well, that you had an interesting blend of parenting that I believe fostered your gift, never put it out. And I equate that to like Yoga Ananda and then other guys like that. We will say some other high level players like that, where they had a good balance of nature, right? They were given a lot of gifts, and then they were given some either crisis or trauma or situation where they had to like blossom, or they were given some ability of like some balance, or they had great equanimity from a young age and then given out. So, so I guess that being said is like, what do you think, like, I guess my question is like, how did your parents, so like you had the gift, and then how did your parents foster that? Coming from a Roman Catholic background that basically in my opinion, put the kibosh on anything paranormal, especially paranormal gifts, especially for women.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really count myself very blessed that I came into the family that I came into and have the parents that I have. It's interesting because a lot of people grow up in spiritualism, or they grow up in some sort of home that is very open. And I grew up in a Catholic home, so that would traditionally feel really restrictive. But my parents never made me feel like my gift was what was going on with me wasn't true or wasn't real. They always believed me.
Did they think you had a gift? Did they think that, or was it, they say, how they?
I feel like they didn't understand, but they knew that it was something spiritual and something supernatural. But the other thing is that my mom, I think, knew it deep down because the same way that I am. But her gifts had opened up really early in her life and had in some ways frightened her, scared her. She had an experience of her grandfather, who she never met, who died before she was born. He died in a boating accident, and he came to her in spirit. But when he showed up to her, he was bloodied. And it was, my interpretation of that is interesting, because there was always a query around whether or not he staged his own death for the insurance money, or if it was truly an accident. And so my belief is that in him coming to her bloodied was his way of saying, this was an accident. I didn't fake my own death and leave my son, your father. But she was too young to understand that. And sometimes there is this weird disconnect between spirit, even though there's such an intelligence there, and the sensitivity of a child, and what's age appropriate and what's not. And so she remembers this very vividly, and she remembers that was the last time she saw anything before she shut it down. And we all have that. We have that capability, we have that sovereignty, we have the right and the ability to shut down our gifts if we don't want to. We can just close that third eye, close all of our chakras, and say no. And that's okay. If that's what our experience calls us to, like just to be in the physical 3D world and not be aware of everything around us, we can do that. So that's what my mom did. But I think when I started to come up with this information, these synchronicities, grandma getting hurt, they were like, okay, this child's onto something. We don't know quite what it is. So they brought me to church, because they thought, well, it's God connected, but we don't know what to do with it. And then there came a time when I was in middle school where my mom really felt, I was in a public school that wasn't supporting my education as well anyway, but she really felt like I could benefit from more of a spiritual connection through school as well, which is why she sent me to the Christian school. And she was right, because it fostered worship and prayer and bringing the power of God into every conversation. And that was missing in my public school, but it was something that I knew to be true in my soul, that God runs through everything, right? So it was the most supportive environment for me, even though it was Christian. And there are some passages in the Bible that will say that these things that were happening to me were evil, right?
Right.
So my dad, bless his heart, he comes from a family of mediums. They didn't always call it that. I think he's got some abilities that are very dormant. He's very dormant. Dad, if you're watching. There was never a time that he was like, you're crazy, what's wrong with you? He just told me one time, he said, God, I would hate to be you. I'd be so scared to go to sleep, because there was always something going on in my room at night. But they always had an open door policy. I could come sleep on their floor. When I was little, I would go sleep in between them. So even at 17, I'm not embarrassed to admit it, there were times at 17 that there were beings in my room I did not want to sleep with, and I would go to their room and they wouldn't be there. So they created a safe space for me to be super sensitive through my life. And that I'm very grateful for, because I know a lot of people like me grow up with the same gifts and they're medicated, or they're ostracized, or they're made to feel like there's something wrong with them. And I think the best thing we can do for our children moving forward, not just our children, but our children, everybody who has children with gifts, is to foster them, to hold them gently, to just draw them out, and to make them feel, to normalize giftedness, because it really is, that is our natural state of being. We are born with these gifts, but culture and society shuts them down, tells them they're not normal, they're not real. Your imaginary friend is just imaginary, but maybe it's not.
I don't know, I like asking this question of people. It's like, do you have a culminating moment that, because we've discussed this, like, you are a medium. Like, this is what you've told me, this of like, this is your, other mentors of, to like, you're a medium, you were born a medium, this is what you'd have to do now. Do you have a culminating moment that when that happened, and that, or maybe that realization, or was it like it built to that point?
Yeah, it was definitely a build. And it was like a build with me running away from it. I didn't, because we've talked about my background. So a lot of my closest friends are still, still strongly anchored in Christian faith. And there's not a full understanding around this gift, the gift of mediumship. And, I think it's like anything else. It's like car salesmen or attorneys or, anybody doctors. There are good doctors and there are not so good doctors, right? There are people who are really in the work to help people. And as we say, like in the light.
But I mean, you could say that about pastors, preachers,
sure,
that whole realm.
Well, and see, that's the thing. I think that's where the misinterpretation comes is, the evil, the bad side of mediumship, the disallowing of it in the Bible. First of all, any kind of religious text came through some sort of a biased vehicle. That's true about any kind of spiritual work at any
right,
point.
like God told me what to write.
Right, but it's still coming through the bias of that person. So even in mediumship, no matter how clear of a channel you are, there's always going to be the bias of that medium's experience coming through. So what was the question? Oh, the culmination. So I ran from it because I didn't I did understand it. And what I did understand of it, I thought was wrong, that you're not supposed to communicate with spirits because you don't know who's good and who's bad and who's trying to trick you, and if the information is wrong or right, and if they're in heaven, don't disturb them. It was sort of this old context of it. But I just kept having this stream of what I term spirit people or loved ones, other people's loved ones, just one after the next. It was like I'd be in an elevator and there was a spirit person to the person who was actually standing there physically next to me, talking to me about this person. And me, I'm inherently shy. I'm an introvert. So the last thing I want to do in an elevator is talk to a total stranger. And you're the opposite, which is like the yin and yang, I think, of us. And so, I kept telling him no. I kept saying, maybe I'm losing it. Like, I even entertained that as an idea. Like, maybe, like, I'm just completely lost my mind. But then one time maybe this is the culminating moment. I don't know if it qualifies, but it was an important and pivotal moment for me. I was getting a massage. My mom had taken me on like a spa day, and I was in the massage, and this woman she was gifted at what she did. She was giving me this massage. And her grandmother came, her dead grandmother in spirit. I've told you this story before, but you've asked if so I'll tell. And I kind of said, oh, I'm glad you're here, but I'm so sorry. I'm not telling your granddaughter this.
She's got to finish, and then maybe.
Like, I'm naked on this table. I'm not going to, yeah, exactly. So, but she was very pushy. She was like the Southern grandmother, and she kept saying, talk to her about this, tell her about that, tell her about this. And she also, I remember, I forgot this part, but she said, tell her I have her baby. Tell her I have her baby. And it felt so important that my whole body tensed up. And I remember the girl kind of working with me slowly. She was like, this is is it pressure? Like, she couldn't understand what was gone wrong because I'd gone kind of rigid. And I said, look, I have to tell you something because I couldn't lay there through the rest of the massage. And she said, okay. And I said, I don't know how open you are to this. I feel like I have this gift that's also a curse, where I have a sensitivity to people who are in spirit. And she sort of like backed away, like, oh God, what is this girl going to say? And I said, this entire time, there's been this woman here who claims to be your grandmother. She looks like this. She's telling me all of these details. And I said, does any of this resonate? And she just started to cry. And she said, oh my gosh, yes. And I guess they were really close. It was her best friend and her grandmother, and she was missing her desperately. And I said, she says that she has your baby. And she just started bawling. And she'd had a miscarriage. I think she'd had 2 healthy children, a miscarriage, and then another healthy child. But she had said that she had prayed that her grandmother would have her baby safe in her arms. Yeah. And so that was probably the culminating moment, because that was the first time that I had actually shared the information that was coming through. And it was a really vulnerable moment, because there I was, super vulnerable on a massage table. And if it had all been wrong, it would have been so awkward. And then I would have really thought something was wrong with my psyche. But I remember finding my mom afterwards. It was in the hot tub or the locker room or something. And I was like, you're never going to believe what just happened. And I told her, and her face just lit up like, I've been waiting for you to find this out for yourself, like I've been waiting for you to step into your true identity.
Where was that? Was that in San Diego?
No, it was in Inverness, and I think Inverness was Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Inverness Hotel, I think. So yeah, that was a really important moment, because it was really validating that the information that I got was meaningful and healing. People act like this is a choice, and it is a choice. I can say no. I can shut it down. I can decide, absolutely, I don't want to do this. And I believe that the spirit world would respect my sovereignty and my journey and my free will and leave me alone for a while. But in that massage, I didn't have a choice. I really didn't feel like I could turn that lady off. Yeah. The need was so great to communicate, and the need for healing, and for this woman to know that her miscarried baby was in spirit, safe in her grandmother's arms, was so intense that she used any means possible to get it through. I think she saw me and thought, that girl can talk to me. Let me talk to her. And more people than you would think have had experiences, maybe not quite that vivid or pivotal or culminating, but certainly moments of knowing that they can't explain. And I think if we just leaned into trusting it more, and stopped calling it weird or strange or crazy, we'd all be in tune and flow, in alignment.
I think a lot of people don't understand the work that you do. People come to you as a last resort. From the little you shared with me, like, how's your day, Kel? Like, the extraordinary, and I think that everybody knows the extraordinary drama. And I mean, I guess from rape, murder, incest, the most terrible things humans can do on our planet, like abhorrent, they come to you in some fashion I think, right, and you tell me if I'm wrong, as to looking for closure, looking for answers, looking for solace, forgiveness. I mean, it's all of that and mixed in there. And I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I guess to relay of the amount of trauma you see and experience, because I experience it third hand and very shrouded, and I'm kind of like listening, kind of like, hey, that sounds, I couldn't imagine. So I guess my question is that, how do you manage that trauma? How do you, because you see and experience that so often, how do you manage that with your psyche, with your mind, everything?
Yeah, that deep question. Unfortunately, I don't feel a solid answer because I'm still navigating that. I think one of the difficulties in the West is that our healers, our psychics, our mediums, our empaths can learn to develop their skills, but what is missing is, how do we clean our energy? How do we allow it to flow sort of away from us? How do we maintain energetic hygiene? And
well, that's something that I think even me, Neanderthal Blake, I'm like, what are you talking about? I think it's something like I don't even understand exactly, because I don't experience and see those things, and I also am not in those situations, and I don't have the same gifts as you. So
yeah, I mean, the same question could probably be asked in a different way of therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, paramedics.
But I feel like in some ways, like, they're detached from it.
Yeah.
Where you're sitting there, like, in essence, like, seeing it and like experiencing, because you've described different situations, again, protecting everybody's anonymity, but of like the situation, I'm just kind of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because you're experiencing it almost. That's how you
do experience it. Yeah. And I think, while spirit's gentle, kind of like the example with my mom and her grandfather, they also will show you and there have been times where and I'm pretty gritty. I can see quite a bit. I feel like I can, and it'd be okay. But there have been times that I'm like, okay, that was too much. Like, I didn't need to see it in that great of detail. You could have just maybe told me, like, you don't need to show everything. So I think, how do I manage it? I have to remind myself it's not mine.
Yeah.
That's first. I cannot carry everything for everyone, nor should I, nor should anybody else. Carry nothing for no one is my imperfect grammatical, sort of motto. And I don't always do a great job at it, to be honest. I think because I'm human, there are times where I just cannot help feel that grief. And the part of mediumship that I don't think very many people know, unless they're mediums, is that the faculty of mediumship works through the clairsentience, the gut feeling. So you feel sometimes that moment of death, or you feel what that person felt, what their loved one felt when they discovered them, or as they were giving them CPR, or when they picked dead child up off the ground. You feel all of it. So you don't just see it, you also feel it. So you live it. And some days I have 6 appointments back to back, and you live trauma after trauma after trauma. And it does take a toll. Like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, because there was one case that was a mother that lost her perfect 2-year-old toddler in a really traumatic way. And I just cried with her through the session. I don't even think the mediumship was very good, to be honest, because I saw it and then I just sort of fell apart. But there is an importance in backing away and allowing spirit to move in and do their work. And that's the channel part. That's the mediumship. Because if I get in the way, if I allow my emotions to overwhelm me and overtake me like I did with that 2-year-old toddler and the mother, it's not as accurate. The messages aren't as clear. I show up like an EMT would to an emergency scene. I show up knowing this is my work.
Right.
You know, I'm a human, I'm an empath, I'm a medium, I'm a spiritual being, but, you know, I'm working. So I have to show up, I have to hold the container, I have to, you know, filter what I see, because that person's lost their loved one. I don't need to re-traumatize them. So they don't need to know how much blood there was. They don't need to know all the stuff. They just need to know what they need to know. So there is a filter that happens there too. There's such an ethical, like a very, very important ethical standard that you have to carry, because you always want to leave somebody better off than you find them. But I would say that most mediums struggle to really stay healthy, mind, body, and spirit. It is an everyday practice. I'm still working through it. And this is one of the reasons I think that we came to Bali, because it's a place of healing. It's a really high spiritual vibration. There's a lot of healing practitioners here. And the East has been doing this work much longer than we have in the West. And so they have better, I would say, I'd venture to say, better practices than we do in the West for healing without making yourself sick. So that's one of my current, you know, inquiries is, what are the modalities that we can implement into what I call like energetic hygiene, so that I can heal into my knees for hundreds, you know, for the rest of my life, because this is what I love to do. And it's what I think I'm made for. It's what I'm meant for. How can I do that and not let it affect me or our relationship or the children or, you know, anything that's important to me?
Yeah. What do you have experience during your time, you know, and right now, being a medium, that was the most vivid, traumatic, or interesting, you know, something like that, that was like not where you talked about culminating moment, but now just like good, bad, or ugly, like, wow, this was an incredible experience, you know, what, no, maybe not incredible, but like, wow, I was showed a lot, this horrible trauma healed or something like that. Do you have a situation or an experience or when you read for somebody that you can think of?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many. There's the work that I do is such a blessing. It's so incredible because you can watch the transformation happen in front of you. And
What, going from just like, you're full of shit to like, oh my God, how did you know that?
yeah, I mean, there's some of that, like the arms crossed, skeptical, you're full of shit and you're just here to trick us and take our money. Like there is some,
Well, no, like what?
it kind of can go from that. But what I'm talking about, so yeah, I love turning a skeptic, because it's not me, it's spirit. You
Right.
know, when a skeptic sits in front of me, it's like, I don't know how this is going to go. But usually then spirit really comes through, because they know they have one shot. It does tend to be, I've got this guy in mind that came to me one time. He was a Marine. You know, he comes in, his arms are huge and he's all tatted up and he's got the devil dog haircut, you know, and he was dragged in there, but he was the one who needed it the most. By the end of the session, he was a puddle of tears and snot and healed, you know, because that was what he needed. So you asked about trauma. I mean, yes, and there's certainly a picture that comes to mind, but I don't, I mean, that was not. So I think parents, I've worked with so many bereaved parents. And when I set out to do this work, I thought that would be really in the minority.
But that's been the majority or something, I think,
It's
right?
been a large amount. What I picture is that, you know, I did an okay job for one child in spirit, and then they go up there and they're like, hey, and they're telling everybody, and I don't know, like there's like a spirit Google, and they're like, who's the medium that can talk to my parents? And you know, it's really delicate work. I know mediums that won't do it. They just they don't they can't, they don't have the I don't know, the cry through the whole session, you know, because losing a child is the most severe pain anybody can ever journey through. So even though I don't know that pain myself, I'm okay to be able to hold that container for the parent or parents that need me to work with their children. Just developed, it's the weirdest thing, but I have friends in spirit. I'm thinking of one guy now, his name's Brandon. I know his mom wouldn't care if I said his name because she's fabulous, but I've worked with Brandon, maybe 6, 7 times, maybe more than that. And with different family members of his as well. So every time I get to know him in a different way. And sometimes when I have a new parent sitting in front of me, I'm aware of Brandon in spirit because he comes to help me. It's almost like he's brought in that child to communicate with their parent because he knows that that's what I do. So there is this like a weird friendship and alliance. I say it's weird just because it's so different. It's not weird. It's natural. It's like Brandon would be my friend if he was living today, it's just his sense of humor and everything connects. But so there are people in spirit that I feel that I know and that I know well because I've communicated with them so many times.
What's from a scientific terms, because I've tried to describe how I think it works, and for the skeptics out there, because there's still many, there will always be them.
Yeah.
So scientifically, how do you think, because it's like I think this gift to me as a non-mediumistic Neanderthal, and I'm proud of that to a degree, where I don't see that. And maybe I have that sensitivity, maybe not, but I don't think so. That, scientifically, how do you think it works?
I have had to really dial it down to kind of like a low level of understanding because I don't know. I think that it's really complicated, right? Like it's in the quantum and there's all kinds of energetics around it and magnetic fields and who knows. But here's what I say to people. We're all on different radio stations. You're on a radio station, I'm on a radio station. Some people are on AM, some people are on FM. Everything is vibration, everything is frequency, and we can all buy into the concept and the scientific reality that everything is energy, right? So we all vibrate and exist at certain vibrational frequencies. In the body, spirit incarnate, we're at a lower vibrational frequency than our loved ones, those who've passed from the physical body. Some people call it the pain body because it's the only place we can experience pain, suffering, low vibrational feelings, thoughts, words, and emotions. So our loved ones are up here, the ones that have gone to heaven. They're in a really, really high vibrational frequency. So let's call it 102.8, right? And we're like down here at like 91.7. We're good. We're in the 90s, but we're not in spirits. So what happens is, what a medium naturally good at, and then what we develop our capacity to do is to raise our vibrational frequency. So we leave the density of the body behind, essentially. So I don't fully leave my body, but my awareness, my consciousness, and it's like a muscle. I've worked with it for years and years and years. It was naturally already open. So I also liken it to like singing, because people can understand singing voices, right? Unless you're deaf and mute, you can sing. Can you sing well? You cannot sing well. I cannot sing well. But our daughters sing really well. And that was just a natural thing that came. So if with training, they could sing even better. Same thing with you and I. We could train, but we probably should never sing publicly. Like, really. So, yeah. It's not good. So same thing with mediumship. It's that attuning, that natural tool, right? It's like being able to reach a higher vibrational frequency. And then there's the study and the work and the focus of holding it. So holding it, because I do sessions that can last up to 2 or 3 hours. Usually a regular session is about 40 minutes. But so you're holding that energy, that vibrational frequency at a very high level for a very long time, which can be super exhausting energetically. What the spirit world knows to do is they know that we need to come down some dials, right? We need to meet. So somewhere in the middle, like maybe we're meeting at 102.3, right? And so they're coming down, I'm coming up, and we're meeting in the middle, which is where the word medium comes from. So it's a middle meeting. And on that same station, I might still hear a lot of static, but I'm able to grasp bits and pieces. And there's times where then like I kind of dip or they go up and then we have to reconnect. And so it's like kind of a constant dance of dialing into that energy. What I've been able to understand, this is the theory of science according to Kelly, is that we all have a mediumistic faculty within us from birth. It's a God-given right. It's built into your body. It's built into your awareness, your knowing, your spirit. your mind, that can dial into your own loved ones. So I believe that we all have that capacity. You could reach your grandpa, or you could reach any of your friends that you've lost, because you know their radio frequency. You've met them. You know what they feel like. There is a part of your spirit that knows their energy. I don't know if we're all universal receivers or not, because people say, aren't we all mediums? Maybe, maybe not. I know that I can receive universally. I can receive information, evidential and otherwise, from people's loved ones who should otherwise be very foreign to me. And that's, I think that's what kind of separates out just your next door neighbor from your professional medium or from your natural medium. So it's so the science behind it is all about frequency, energy, and vibration. And how it all works, I don't know. I know how I do it. I have a process for teaching it and helping others develop it, but I don't know how all of the physics of it work. I know that modern physics, some people in modern physics, actually I have somebody you should talk to on this podcast, are endeavoring to understand it and to explain it. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. I have my own theories too. So
there's a little bit of DNA as well that plays into it. There's a family giftedness and different markers, as I understand it, in family bloodlines. Like anything else, there's probably a lot of good singers or good dancers in one family. You know,
Sure.
it's almost like learned within the DNA.
So I describe Kelly to friends, family, or people I meet, and like a medium, I say, but also just because I can't leave any discussion without mentioning the book Dune as a Bene Jesuit. And in so many words, if you've read the book, you should, so you can honestly level up your life. But as a Bene Jesuit, and if you've read the book, then you'll know why. You'll know exactly. I say she's like a Bene Jesuit, and the fact that how the book works, and this sect of women have the ability to connect to their loved ones and people that have passed on through their bloodline. And so I just think it's just fascinating, and I just love that. And I didn't realize when when we were getting married, that I was like, it's like a blessing and a curse, if you know what I mean, but
hard to keep secrets.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of going for about an hour. Do you have anything that I should ask that I shouldn't have asked? I mean, anything that I kind of missed?
Well, I think we just sort of went into it assuming everybody knows what a medium is, and not everybody knows. But I think if they listened this far, you've heard enough to probably piece it together or Google it. I think what's important for people to know is that I am not super special and unique, even though I love that you think that I am.
She is. That's it. That's true.
What I find more and more is that everybody, some sort of a beautiful ability that is supernatural.
I agree.
And maybe it's just natural, but we call it supernatural because it's not what we're used to in our day to day. But everybody has built-in intuition. Everybody has a built-in faculty of spirit communication to be able to hear not only their loved ones, but their angels, if they believe in angels, their guides. There are spirit guides that are with all of us who are essentially assigned to us at birth and are just kind of standing by like a spiritual Siri that you can ask questions of, and you can ask for help from. And they're not, the way that I understand it from them and from what we call spiritual law, is that they're not allowed to intercede unless you ask for help that interferes with your free will and your sovereignty.
Well, that you're describing exactly. We know multiple people that have had some incredibly intense experiences using the medicine ibogaines and some other ones, and almost all of these friends have experience where they're like in the medicine, and at some point they give up and they're like, please help me, and then they get help, and it's fascinating. That's how you describe that, and it's like, well, there it is. It's like it's almost like, hey, you have to open the doorway up to infinity, the possibilities, into source, into this Christ consciousness, and then you get it.
I think what plant medicine and ibogaines is like a frog. poison,
No,
right?
it's a root.
Oh, it's a root. Okay, so
It's a
plant
shrub.
medicine,
Yeah.
we can call it that. What I think one of the greatest benefits that it has for people is it rewires your.
Well, I think it rewires mind, body, spirit.
It does, but it clears away sort of the brush or the density of what you've been told to believe, and it opens up your heart and your spirit. And that's really our natural state of being. And somehow for me and other people like me, we didn't let that density, kind of close us off. I believe it was a DMT study that they did through Johns Hopkins University. Don't quote me on this, but something along these lines. I believe it was a bunch of pastors and ministers and priests. And anyway, so they journeyed with DMT, and almost all of them afterwards said that after their experience, they knew God less, but loved him or her more.
Hmm.
And I think, I think that's beautiful. Like what an incredible blessing. So what I was trying to say before is yes, plant medicine is it's sort of like it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to God, to oneness, to great spirit, to your own spirit. And it's right there. It's always right there.
Right.
It's always available. And sometimes we need tools or we need medicine to help get us there. But once connected, you can grow that connection. You can stay in connection. And I think that's one of my most favorite things is when that light bulb moment goes off or goes on, when the light bulb goes on for somebody and they think, my gosh, I can do this now myself, because it's like teaching a man to fish, right?
Yes.
I can meet with somebody 10 times and read for them. But what I really want them to
Right.
do is learn how to reach their loved one on their own. Because if we all were in touch with our internal GPS, with our guides, our angels, our loved ones, people would just be better off. We'd all be happier.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think we're hit our about an
Over in
hour.
time.
We're good on time, but thank you for
Thank
sitting
you
down
for having
for
in our
that
living room.
show. Yeah, it's a beautiful living room here in Bali. Since, if you could tell everybody where to find you to go sign up, because obviously we're going to get millions of views. So what your website is, and then kind of like your deal.
Yeah, my website is socalmedium.com. We're not in SoCal anymore, but it's still the website. So socalmedium.com or at socal_medium for Instagram. And
then you're going to be LinkedIn will be up too.
Yeah, Blake's been driving the LinkedIn thing
Yep.
hard for years, so I'll finally do that as well. And yeah, I think through my website and is pretty much where you'll be able to find everything that I'm doing, and hopefully more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.